You know, Dana, this is starting to feel like a romantic comedy.
Yeah.
On again, off again, on. Can't these two just like put a ring on
I
it,
know how it
Iran?
ends.
Yeah, you know how it ends. Yeah.
It ends with Iran being put away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Trump and NATO make up. And then that's how it ends. I
Wow.
could write that tomorrow.
Who would play Iran? Penelope Cruz?
Go back and see. But we have a block like that coming up pretty soon where we
Yeah.
talk about wokesters. President Trump gave peace a chance.
Mhm.
And he said something today in one of the press conferences when he was with Zelensky. And he was talking about assassination attempts on his life and that he is a big target of Iran. And I went back and I read the sentence a couple of times, and I don't know for sure, but it seems to me he must have additional information that they want to continue to try to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, enough with you. And also he can see and they're watching. And during this funeral, he gave them a free pass. You can move about the country. You can have your funeral. And they were doing funny business. And he's like, no more. So he's started to go after the small boats that were doing the mines. And then what does Iran do? They track the neighbor. So I think that he is done with the back and forth. He doesn't want to keep dating this way. And he can trust in the United States military to do what it needs to do so that he can move on from this.
Speaking of the military, Emily, do you think that we're inching closer to going in there? I'm sure the young men and women and the forces are kind of at these bases wondering what's going on.
Yeah, and I think that is a question that a lot of American people have. But the president keeps insisting, essentially simultaneously announcing renewed military escalation while insisting that he does not view this escalation as a return to an open-ended war. And it seems to me that what they're doing is sort of presenting a hierarchical escalation tree and saying there's many steps in between 0 and 60. This will never be the open-ended war that we have been mired in for decades past, and that this administration won't. And I think, J.D. Vance also earlier said it when he said, if you attack one of our ships, we're going to knock the hell out of you, right? So they're just simply saying, you tap us, we will roundhouse you back. We still have economic options. We still have a ton of military options to all of those varying degrees. I think that the immediate issue for the American people is exhaustion, obviously, safety of our troops, but it's not the Iran's nuclear program. I think it's the Strait of Hormuz. It is the security and freedom of navigation in that strait. So now it seems to me we have more NATO allies on board, obviously not Spain after today, but that will join us in really red rovering linked arms and ensuring that the Strait of Hormuz stays open, because the piracy factor is something that everyone can feel. I think the fact that Iran will fight to the death and has no interest in self-preservation other than a latent spark that can then erupt later to bomb us all, that's their issue. Our issue is Strait of Hormuz.
Harold, should we bomb Spain?
I'm not for bombing Spain, but let me build on the points that Emily was making. I think that the president, unfortunately, has lost a lot of leverage over the last few weeks. In June, late June, President Trump said that this regime was a different regime, that he looked at a group of people that he could do business with, that he thought would usher Iran into a new era of prosperity. Less than 4 weeks later, he's calling them scum, cuckoo, loco. I think what the president is learning, and this is where I differ with you, Emily, I think that the issue here is the enriched uranium. And as we sit here today, remember, before we started this military effort, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth came before the country and said that the Iranians were days away from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And that was one of the reasons that justified us moving like we moved, which I supported. Now, I don't know what has changed in the last 60 days. I know we launched an incredible military attack, but they still seem to have some military capabilities. And to your point, Emily, where you're right, the Strait of Hormuz, we need not kid ourselves. The Strait of Hormuz is controlled by the Iranians. If it were not, then gas prices would not have been as high as they were during the time of the war, and they certainly would not be rising as we sit here today. I think the president's faced with something you were talking about earlier, Greg. He's faced with the proposition of, do you send military troops or do you enlarge our military, much like General Keane has repeatedly said on our network? Whenever you're trying to negotiate with the Iranians, they're different than the Abraham Accord negotiations. These are the worst negotiators, the most vicious, pernicious, not the people, but the regime. And I think the president, I've said it many times before, stop talking so much. There's no need to tell people at a NATO conference in the morning that you're going to attack them this evening, then come back and kind of back off of it in the afternoon. If you're the Iranians, and I'm not, if you're advising the Iranians, nor would I, you would have to think that they'd be saying, you know, we kind of have him where we want him. He wants this war over because he knows it's hurting him politically. We have an opportunity to prolong this. We can continue to be agitators in the Strait of Hormuz, and he will have to respond. Our leverage and our strategic security, I'm not convinced, and maybe someone around the table can convince me, that we have advanced that more than we did after Operation Midnight Hammer. I was on the president's side. I still am on his side. I think we need to actually engage in more military action there because it is clear that is the only thing these people understand if we're going to get an end that ends the uranium enrichment as well as keeps the Strait of Hormuz open for world commerce.
You know, I think, Paul, like when you see that shift in rhetoric with Trump, it all comes down to reciprocity. He'll say good stuff about you until he doesn't see something in return, and then you're scum.
Yeah.
But Harold said a lot of good stuff there.
I think Harold's take is quite reasonable. And let me say also that, Dana, I think that you are right over the target. Sorry for that metaphor. But he refused, that is, Donald Trump refused to take his famous Air Force One Qatari gift plane home from Turkey. All right. Why? Does he fear there's a transponder in there or something that he feels was secreted by the Qataris that the Iranians could launch a missile at? I don't know, but he's got this big, beautiful plane that we've heard a lot about.
He flew it over there, though.
Yeah, he flew it over there, and then once he was there, he must have got a briefing, like you're saying, and they said, Mr. President, we picked up this stream of reporting in XYZ. You can use your imagination. All right, look, I just, you know, in the time we have, I just want to advance this story to the extent that it's possible. We're in a very Hobson's choice situation. They are not going anywhere. The IRGC is not leaving. This is their bailiwick. They have nothing to go back to if we take them out. So they're going to go all the way. So what does that mean? Well, very clearly, bombing doesn't affect them. I liken it to a battered spouse syndrome sort of situation. The people of Iran are the battered spouse, and the IRGC is willing to kill them. And we're the police out the door saying, come on, let's talk. It's a hostage negotiation. Let's talk a little bit. And they're not that interested because they have a good amount of leverage. So what are you left with is coercion. From where I sit, nothing we've done so far seems to be shaking them. And so the red line seems to be approaching, which is what? The one thing nobody wants is boots on the ground. But I don't see how you get the straits open, rid of the IRGC, and the nuclear material secreted in a way that we can definitely say it's all out of there without putting eyes on. I just don't see it. And many of us said before we launched, reasonable minds can disagree about whether we should do this or not. But if we do it, it's got to be all the way, and it's got to be a clear, empirically defined success. And I don't know that we're there without doing what I just described. And I'm not advocating for that. I want to be clear. But we're in a spot now where very clearly we don't have all the leverage, as Harold says. And so what do? My last point as we go out the door here is this. What I'd like to see is a decoupling. What do we need their oil? We don't. Every time somebody, stubs their toe in the Straits of Hormuz, our prices go up we've all heard that it's not our oil that comes from the Straits of Hormuz. We don't need it. We have our own. Right now, you've got new fields opening up, Guyana, Suriname, Argentina, obviously Venezuela. We should be the energy powerhouse. They should be kissing our behinds. We don't need the Middle East anymore. We got allies, the Gulf states, obviously, Israel, obviously. But in terms of fuel, which is all the leverage here, we should be looking at our own hemisphere. And that's the Don Roe doctrine. If you haven't heard about that, look that up, because that is something Donald Trump is serious about. And we're seeing the Latin American nations shift to the right, coming around to capitalism, coming into the American sphere of influence. That, from where I sit, is the future. So the next time somebody in Hormuz says, we don't want this tanker going through, we say, what's it got to do with us? Go ahead. Talk to you later.
All right.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.